The LMC casts a wide net over the Sound Shore to bring you local event info, profiles, and conversations. Recorded in the heart of the Village in Mamaroneck Cinemas at the studio on the Avenue, LMC Media brings you the LMC Cast Community Profiles.
Hi, my name is Mike Reynolds. I'm a longtime Mamaroneck resident who has charted some minor bits of personal and familiar history around town. On this edition of LMC Cast Community Profile, I'm joined by a man who knows all kinds of things about history in Westchester County in New York State. Dr. Peter Feynman is the founder and president of the Institute of History, Archaeology, and Education. IHAIR, as it were, is a nonprofit organization that provides enrichment programs to schools, professional development programs for teachers, and public programs. Peter's educational resume marks entries at UPenn, NYU, and Columbia. His interests include ancient civilizations, biblical history, American history, and New York history. Peter's an author and is involved with numerous museums and historical societies. How you doing today, Peter?
Fine, thank you. You know, a long time ago, I was at Actionville, which is in the Mamaroneck Avenue school system.
Oh, really? Okay.
I don't know if it still exists anymore. It was a 5th and 6th grade program.
Okay.
So I thought about it as I drove by here.
So you're coming back home in a sense.
Coming back home.
Okay. Today we're going to talk to Peter about the American Friends of Lafayette and his role in organizing Westchester County activities around Lafayette Day on August 18th, which will include a stop in Mamaroneck at the old schoolhouse in Harbor Island Park on Sunday, August 18th at 1 p.m. The activities are going to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the Marquis de Lafayette's return to a much larger or smaller U.S., depending on time's perspective, back in 1824. So Lafayette was a major figure in the American Revolution, both on the battlefield and in bringing the French in to help the colonies break away from England. Peter, can you give us a sense for the man and what his role is in helping to shape this country?
Okay, he was invited here in 1824 at the suggestion of President James Monroe, also from Speaker of the House Henry Clay,
okay,
who would then be a presidential candidate in 1824. And they thought they would invite this living legend, the only living general from the Revolution in 1824. Because at that time we were approaching our 50th anniversary.
Right.
And now we're approaching our 250th. But we were approaching our 50th then. And they wanted Lafayette to come here. At the time, the country was very divided, what they called sectionalism. And it was a presidential election year, and there was a lot of animosity.
Kind of like today?
Well, yeah, a little bit. That's why I bring it up. Yeah.
Okay.
Country was very divided. If you look at an electoral college map, you will see there are 4 major candidates. They all have different parts of the country that voted for them, and there was no real national figure, except for one, Lafayette, who obviously couldn't run for president.
Okay.
So you look at a map with different colors for different presidents, you see the colors are very concentrated in the different regions, New England, South, West, so on. So he came here at their suggestion, leaving in July 13th. And he arrived here on August 15th. Now, of course, they didn't know exactly when he would get here, didn't have the kind of communication technologies we have today. So he arrived in Staten Island. He stayed there at the home of the vice president, and then the next day came to New York, where there was a big parade. And when I say there was a big parade, I mean there was a big parade.
This is like Canyons of Heroes
well,
material?
He was the first Canyon of Heroes.
Is he really? Okay.
He's the first time they had a real parade, unless you count when George Washington rode in his horse. It wasn't called the Canyon of Heroes then. So he went uptown from Castle Clinton, which is where his boat docked, which is now a National Park Service site, to City Hall. And when I say thousands, I mean even tens of thousands of people turned out to greet him, which essentially is all of Manhattan then, because that was New York City. Brooklyn wasn't part of the city, Staten Island wasn't part of the city, Bronx, and so on. So everybody really had turned out to greet him.
So this guy was like, I think I've heard you say you've likened him to the Taylor Swift of 1824.
Well, he's much bigger.
Really? How
He's
can that
much
be?
bigger than Taylor Swift.
Okay.
Because Taylor Swift is simply one celebrity among many. And when she goes into a town, she draws her crowd, but not necessarily everybody in the town.
All right.
When Lafayette came to any place, whether it was New Rochelle, Mamaroneck, Rye, and so on, everybody turned out. Everybody came. They came by horse, carriage, on foot, whatever. It was a big deal. Everybody wanted to be part of it. So it's more even than with Taylor Swift.
Okay. And every town has a Lafayette Street or a Lafayette
Well,
Avenue or something
that's
like
one
that,
way
right?
you can see that you have one here. You have one in Mamaroneck. You have a Lafayette Street. Everywhere you went afterwards, counties were named after him, cities were named after him, parks were named after him, statues. You know, it's strange, but in the last few weeks, when I read the news, I look and I see somebody says, oh, they're from Lafayette. You know, whatever the news event is, it has nothing to do with Lafayette. But it says they're in Lafayette County so-and-so. Even out in California,
Right.
which he didn't go, wasn't part of the United States then. So he really left his legacy here in all the places named Fayette,
Right.
Lafayette, LaGrange, which is his home, like Mount Vernon was Washington's home.
Okay.
So you have places, there's just all over, there are places named after him.
So this guy was the man. Again, I mentioned the battlefield, but again, it was his work behind the scenes that made him
He was
so
the
famous.
man. What really impressed the Americans then, first he was a 19-year-old kid, pretty young, who came over here, and he came from a very rich family. So since when did 19-year-old rich kids come from France to help out colonies in the 1770s? You know, like he's the only one. So he was a big deal, and Americans remembered that he did that. They remembered that he was injured at Brandywine, and they remembered that he helped bring the French here with Rochambeau leading
Right.
to Yorktown Heights and final victory. So he was a big hero. He was a big hero. And he also became the symbol of liberty. It's like before we had the Statue of Liberty, there was Lafayette.
So he could have been out in the harbor.
Well, that's French statue too.
Right.
But he was a living hero from the American Revolution. In just as they'd all died. We were coming up on our 50th year. No one knew if America would survive. We were an experiment, a journey. You know, would the new generation be able to carry on in the footsteps of the founding fathers?
Right.
Would they be able to live up to the ideals that George Washington and Hamilton and Jefferson and all those people who wrote the documents that define our country to this very day? So he was a link to that. So that was very impressive for the people to see that. They were like touching the past. It was a reminder to them that the past was still alive, and this new generation that was coming up could be associated with him and therefore associated with George Washington. His son, George Washington Lafayette,
Right. Yeah.
accompanied him here as well. So that was important for Americans then, wondering, like, I compare it sometimes to what we just saw in D-Day. Remember, we had all these old veterans there, maybe their last one, the last great war,
Sure.
the last great generation. Well, he was like that, but he was still alive.
Right.
He was the last great war, you know, the Revolution, and he was alive. He was in his 60s then. And by looking at him and touching him and talking to him, and they all would yell out, "You remember this battle, you remember this, you remember that." They were reminded of the Revolution and that the spirit of the Revolution still lived. So he was a living presence, that Revolution lived, that dream still lived, and that was important to people there.
Sure. He was
So
also associated with Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, I think.
all of them.
Right.
He knew all of them. Either he knew them directly here, he knew them from France, back and forth.
is there, again, in terms of, so as you said, big parades, a lot of fanfare in Manhattan. I guess after that, he was going to see John Adams up in Boston and took a ride up the Post Road, which
Right.
I guess maybe took a little bit longer than he might have thought because a lot of people turned out as well.
Well, I don't know if it took longer than he thought, but the Boston Post Road was the Boston Post Road even then. It didn't have the exact contours that it had today, and John Pritz, the Mamaroneck Historical Society, will be talking about that on the 18th. How what we think of the Boston Post Road now is not exactly where it was then.
Okay, that makes, yep.
So he'll talk a little about how it's shifted over the years. But essentially, he took the stagecoach route from New York, Lower Manhattan, which was really Manhattan at that point, up to Boston and Cambridge. And he made stops along the way. What we have in Westchester is we have a series of stagecoach stops in New Rochelle, Mamaroneck, Rye, and Portchester. The only one actually left is in Rye. If you're familiar with Rye, it's the Square House.
Okay, yeah.
Or the
that's
Rye
right.
Historical Society.
Yep.
That's the actual house where he and George Washington Lafayette had lunch and where they exchanged horses for their carriage. But the New Rochelle one was knocked down. The Portchester one was knocked down. We don't know exactly where it was here in Mamaroneck. John has some idea where he thinks it was because he says this was not the center of town back then. Mamaroneck Avenue was not the center of town.
So he'll give us a little bit of a clue then on that
He'll
Sunday.
give you a little bit of a clue. And he says we may have been a little further north of here
Okay.
towards Rye. But whatever it is, it's not there anymore. You know, the newspaper accounts that I've been reading from 1824, it specified where. So we have the names of those places. Sometimes we had photographs of them because they survived for a while. But for Mamaroneck, we just don't have anything. So the reason why we're going to the 1816 house is because that's the building you have here that's older than the 1824 visit. And it's at a nice setting
Sure.
at the harbor where the buses can go, the cars can line up.
Right, so you got all kinds of people coming up. You're going to be down in Manhattan when the ceremonies first start for a
Correct.
couple of days, and then coming up into the Westchester tour, as it were.
Right. 150 people or thereabouts have signed up for the bus tour that they didn't even think about offering at the beginning.
So you've been involved with this for a while, maybe a lot longer than you anticipated, sir?
It's not only a lot longer, it's a lot more.
Okay. Okay.
It's a lot more work. I mean, putting together the program in New York was a major production. And then the Westchester part, I pretty much had on my own, working with each of the municipalities.
Okay.
You know, I didn't dictate to New Rochelle, Mamaroneck, what they should do. I just said, we're going to have a bus or 3 buses. And I didn't know at the beginning how many people would register for this. It was a surprise when they said all of a sudden, oh, you've got 150 people registered. And so I said, okay, here's what we're going to, because, you know, most historical societies can't handle 150 people.
Sure.
You go to historic sites, they're not big enough. School groups can't go, you don't have 150 school kids even at a site. So it requires some logistics to work that out. Mamaroneck here, it's an open area, so it's nice as far as that goes. But yes, basically then I had to put together a schedule and said, we will bring a Lafayette interpreter. We will bring a Lafayette descendant, 8th generation descendant.
Really? 8 generations, huh?
8th generation descendant, Virginia Lafayette, who will be here with her 2 daughters. She will sing the Marseillaise, the French national anthem, when she's here on the 18th. She will sing that as part of the program right here at the schoolhouse.
And there's some other games and activities, kind of a family affair, if you will.
Right. I've been working with the Lions Club a lot and the DAR to put together family fun, I call it, Family Lafayette,
Okay.
as opposed to History Lafayette. So there'll be activities for the kids. I don't know what they all are. I know there'll be a storyteller.
Right.
I know there'll be some crafts people.
And you've
the Boy Scouts will be there.
You've
the Girl
consulted with
Scouts
the
will be there.
weathermen to say it's definitely not going to rain that day?
You know, this weather these last few days, you know, I was driving down here. I live in Portchester, and they're talking about just tornado watch. I go, what? Tornado?
Oh, man. Yeah.
You know, we were thinking, like in New York, okay, where are we going to have the water stations for when they're walking around Lower Manhattan? It's going to be August. It's going to be 80s, whatever, 90s. We've got to have water for the people as they're walking around in Manhattan.
Sure, it makes sense, yeah.
We don't need it right here because they're not going to be walking around very much or in any of these places. We're just going to go to a stop, and that's where we're going to be. Then they're going to get back on the bus. But if the weather's like this, we don't have to worry about, well, the water we have to worry about is the water coming from the sky.
You got it. That's
not
right.
the water drinks. I mean, it's just this weather has been, I don't know what it's going to be like. You know, I haven't looked at the forecast that far out, but I am starting to get nervous.
Sorry to bring it up. I apologize.
No, apparently this whole weekend is going to be wet.
Okay. So we've got, you know, Lafayette was here for quite some time. I mean, not only East Coast, but he made the rounds, I think there were 24 states at that point.
When
So he was here for a long time.
He was here for 13 months,
Okay.
from August to next September.
Okay.
When he first came here, his anticipation only was go to the original 13.
Okay.
And then everywhere he went, it was so popular. So the other states started saying, hey, we want him too. Come to our place. So we had to do a 24-state tour. So it was
Maybe
the
not
whole
quite
country.
Taylor Swift level, but all the same.
But everywhere he went, in all 24, it was the same reaction.
Okay.
The only one maybe he didn't always get as big a reaction is because he was very anti-slavery.
Right.
So we can see in some parts of the country, maybe that wasn't the most popular position.
I would imagine.
But he went to all 24 states. Some he just sort of whizzed through. Didn't necessarily stay for many days, but he did travel the whole thing. And to me, that's an amazing part of it. It's not like today, you know, let me go online, make a reservation in a motel, a hotel. Let me do MapQuest or Google Maps, see how far it is. No, he was just, he was traveling all 24.
All right. We're getting to the end here. I wanted to say, for those who want to find out a little bit more about Lafayette Day, you can go to Google and type in Dr. Peter Feynman discusses Major General Lafayette's bicentennial return, and a YouTube video will appear. Or you can check out Peter's July 13th article on the Institute of History, Archaeology, and Education, the IHAIR website, and the story is entitled Lafayette Returns to the U.S. I just wanted to say thanks, Peter, for giving us a preview of what's going to happen in Mamaroneck and in Westchester County on the 18th, sharing a bit of history about the Marquis de Lafayette, I should say. The Marquis de Lafayette. And if you look it up, he's got 6 or 7 first names.
He does.
Anyway, I just want to say, Peter, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate this opportunity.
All right. The Mamaroneck Historical Society, Peter, LMC Media, and I hope to see you there at the old schoolhouse in Harbor Island on the 18th at 1 o'clock.
Can I put in a plug for the Lions Club, which was very helpful?
Absolutely.
The DAR was very helpful. And Jason Pinto from the Village was very helpful in setting this up.
All right. So we're going to see all of those folks and more there as well on the 18th. So anyway, that concludes this episode of LMC Cast Community Profile. Hope to see you all there. Or until next time, this is Mike Reynolds. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the LMC Cast Community Profiles, produced at LMC Media's studio on the Avenue. Visit lmcmedia.org to book your time in this state-of-the-art convenient location, walkable from the Metro North train station on Mamaroneck Avenue. You can also support this nonprofit media center at lmcmedia.org/donate.